Ireland's Six Nations campaign was reignited in Twickenham on Saturday, and with it, potentially, Andy Farrell's Ireland tenure. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. In tonight's episode, we will digest all the major talking points from what was a record Ireland win away to England on Saturday. Will Slattery here with you. Delighted to be joined, as always, by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, how are things?
Hey, Will, how are you?
Doing very well, thanks. Also delighted to be joined by our good friend Jonathan Bradley. Jonathan, how are you?
Good to be on, and happier times than my last visit to the pod, so looking forward to this one.
I know. I think we were all looking forward to this one. I've been inundated with text messages all day. What time are you recording at? What time will it be ready at? So look, we're doing it now. Hopefully I'll get it in the near future. Although this could go on for so long, there's so much to discuss. Who knows when it'll actually drop in your feed. Just before we kick off, the Left Wing is proudly sponsored by Energia. Ireland versus Scotland on March 14th is already a complete sellout, but Energia wants to get you inside the Aviva Stadium. They are giving away tickets to the final showdown of the Guinness Men's Six Nations, and to enter, head to Energia's Instagram or TikTok pages before March 2nd, and you can be in with a chance of winning tickets. You will have details for those two pages in our show notes if you'd like to enter. Don't miss your chance, along with Energia, to be there. Think of the possibilities. Jonathan, what a game that was on Saturday. Ireland 42, England 21. Had been held up, certainly after Paris, but I would say even before that, as the real kind of litmus test about where Ireland are now in the pecking order globally. There was a sense that France and South Africa had maybe pulled themselves away, and we were kind of wondering, could Ireland still reach a certain level? Could they be the best of the rest? Were they better than England, who they'd played last year and beaten before England went on a winning run? And we got a few answers on Saturday. Guys we hadn't maybe seen play to their level in quite a while, since maybe the Lions store really standing up. Some of the kind of newer faces in the team having unbelievable outings. Where do you want to start? What sparked this amazing 21-point victory, a record-setting victory in Twickenham for you?
I think it's a vindication for this team. It's a vindication for Andy Farrell's selection policy. I don't think we were at the stage where Andy Farrell needed personal vindication, but certainly of his selection policy in sticking with those guys. I think so many of people who watch an awful lot of this team were very much on the fence coming out of the autumn. The defeats to New Zealand, the defeats to South Africa, I think it made an awful lot of people think that was the tipping point for this side. And then that was really, really rammed home by the game in Paris. And I think that was the moment, I think, when not just the majority, but the overwhelming majority thought that this team had reached the end of the road. And one of the few people, I think, who was in that minority who thought that there was still road left to run for this team was Andy Farrell. And you see the response that he got from the players, the buttons that he was able to press to get performances out of the likes of Gibson Park, out of the likes of Josh van der Flier. We talked about it earlier before we started recording, but also not just in the players that he dropped coming back into the team in form, but also the players that he didn't drop, showing that they could still respond to that, to still give those performances. The likes of Joe McCarthy, the likes of Dan Sheehan. It was just a complete narrative shift for this Ireland team. It's been doom and gloom for a long time. There hasn't been this signature performance, this signature result for this team to hang their hat on in quite some time. Really going back to the second test in South Africa was the last time they won a game that felt in the mixer, that felt like it wasn't a game that they should win. And I think it's revitalized the team. It's revitalized the mood around the team, certainly in terms of the public discourse. And for the first time in a while, I think Ireland are looking forward with what the rest of us will see as a coherent plan. Ireland and Andy Farrell will certainly tell you that the plan was always there and this was always part of the plan. But a lot of us couldn't see it, myself included. I'll not try and shirk away from that. Like, I thought this team had gone as far as it was going to go and it needed to be changed, and needed to be revitalized. And now all of a sudden, you hear Andy Farrell talking afterwards about the potential that this team has to grow towards the next World Cup. And it feels like the mood around this team is it's done a 180. It's completely different on the back of 80 minutes.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say it's a rebirth, because the guys, as you say, who stood up and played so well are guys that have been here for a long time and will still be part of the team. But it felt like a renewal. It just felt like a reminder. And the big question was, we know this team sheet is a great team sheet on paper, but can they deliver on grass? And they proved that they still can. Certainly on Saturday, they looked so many 8s and 9s out of 10s across the board. Very reminiscent of that 2021 game against England, where coming up to it, there was a lot of talk about how, no, we're close. We do think there's still, we're about to unlock something. And it was hard to see it, but they were right. They were, as you said, there was a vindication for plenty of Andy Farrell's selections, as you said, not just the guys he picked, but the guys he decided to keep in the team, over previous weeks. Like I mentioned Josh van der Fleer last week. I didn't actually think he would be brought back in, but he was, and he played really, really well. That was another one that he had kind of carefully managed over the last 2-3 weeks to get a tune out of. Luke, where do you want to start? Like, why do you think it was such a good performance? Why did Ireland win by so much? What jumped out to you?
I think England capitulated, first of all. That's, I think we're probably getting a little bit carried away with ourselves. I think they were poor. I think they carried on, their poor defensive performance from the Scotland game against Ireland. I think they were on top in the game. Well, not unbelievably on top, but they had the better of the exchanges, I think. And then they really lost heart once Ford missed those 2 kicks to the corner. I mean, their heads went completely down. They couldn't win anything in the air. I think they made a few bad selections in hindsight on the not in hindsight on the Rundle, but certainly I think I'm just not so sure they got the center partnership correct. And I think they paid for that defensively, certainly. And then I think the selections in the pack were poor from their perspective. I think we wondered about that. I think about, geez, if they get on top, they look fast, they look powerful, they look like, that back row. But the composition was always a bit unusual. It looked like it was slightly imbalanced towards maybe 2 fetchers and 2 powerful runners in Earl and Pollock. And I think the more traditional back row that kind of Ireland selected with kind of Byrne at 6, I think, and Van der Fleer at 7, Doris at 8. I think they were so on top for large parts of the game. So I think that was a big part of it, guys. In terms of Ireland, I thought their ball handling was really good. That makes a massive, like, it sounds basic, but catching the ball and passing it pretty good, you have a shot. I mean, you can actually attack a team. I thought they were really good there. I thought the forwards as well, the interplay amongst the forwards makes a massive difference. You saw a few of them, trying to throw in dummies here and there. Some of the tip-ons were there, kept the defence guessing. I thought the English defence was atrocious, in fairness. The Genge one was the highlight of that against Doris.
What do you think happened with the Genge?
I have no idea why he just wouldn't, because he didn't even need, for me, he just dips the shoulder. But I was like, why just, you could easily have scragged him to slow him down or to stop him getting into the breakdown if you did buy the dummy. So it looks like he buys the dummy, but he just tucks his arm. If he just held his arm out, he probably would have done both. He probably would have tackled him anyway. It was a bizarre moment for such a good player to make that mistake. But there was loads of them all over the pitch. And I think I think Ireland really capitalised on that because the ball handling was really, really good. I thought Crowley had an excellent performance. I think that really helped. I thought he was good. Like, Ireland were, you hear me talk all the time about Ireland, like, start off being stingy. And they were stingy. Some of those defensive efforts at the start of the game were massive, and I actually thought England rode their luck on a couple of occasions with some penalties that should have been given against them, but Ireland still hung tough. And that's a great way to keep yourself in a test match. And then when they had the opportunities, they really, really capitalised on that. I thought their rucking was excellent. I thought Ryan quietly, no, I haven't heard anyone mention Ryan. He was outstanding throughout the game. His physicality at the ruck. I think McCarthy, yes, has probably come in for a little bit of criticism here and there. So he's probably the guy everyone was saying, well, that was a big bounce back performance. But a lot of it has been built around, I think, Ryan's ability at the breakdown and the tackle to really hurt teams and to be really, they put the ball on a really good platform for what was the key guy, Gibson Park. I thought he was just outstanding. And it was because they laid such a good platform on for him. And he really, really delivered. So there's lots there, guys. One thing I would say, and the key thing I would like people to take away is, probably not to get too far ahead of ourselves here. I think England had a bad day at the office. And I think if they got some of their selections, if they made some different selections, I think they'd probably be a different team. And if they got those kicks to the corner, it also might have been a very different game. But we've a right to be very pleased. The guys can go into the next match, with massive confidence, as they should, and deservedly so. And I do think the complexion looks very, very different for this team after that match. This was always the key match for me. You heard me say that in the Helix, Will, and you've obviously heard me say throughout the course of this that I wouldn't be making as many changes as people were saying, bar 10. I think I might possibly face some criticism for being maybe a little bit for possibly trying to stick with some of the older contingent, but they repaid the faith, I think, on the weekend, didn't they? And there's still some top quality operators there. And as I said, and I've continuously said, it's not over for this team in the context of the World Cup. I still think they can get these guys there in top quality and be a threat at the World Cup. So yeah, they're kind of my thoughts on how the game transpired and what Ireland and England did. Both did well and poor on the day. And yeah, no, it was so pleasing. How pleasing was that to be coming in today, knowing that we weren't going to be kind of criticizing the kind of another mediocre performance. So pleasing for Irish, and I'm delighted for the guys, but delighted for the Irish supporters too. It was a great day.
Jonathan, why do you think we haven't seen this level of performance in a while? Like, Luke mentioned England and what they brought or didn't bring, and Ireland were so good on Saturday and England were so poor. Like, it would beg the question: did Ireland not play like this against South Africa, France, or New Zealand because South Africa and France and New Zealand are a lot better than England? Basically, is my question. Like, well, if Ireland, because Ireland played so well, sorry to cut across you. I feel like if Ireland had brought that to Chicago, they would have beaten the All Blacks and beaten them well. But the reason why they didn't, obviously, like, not to go overall ground, was that they were undercooked and they were this and they were that. But like, is it a case of Ireland running into a team that is better than on Saturday, or is this the new level we can expect from Ireland, or in the medium term? What's your view on why we haven't seen this in a while? Because obviously it was so good, you're kind of like, oh, unbelievable. But why have we been waiting so long to see this?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, and the point that Luke makes about not getting carried away is a good point, because France still happened. The game in Paris still happened. I think we can say, we have incontrovertible evidence that France are a better team than Ireland. South Africa are a better team than Ireland. New Zealand, I don't think are that good, which is what made Chicago all the more frustrating. Ireland did come in undercooked that day, but England, I think, are a good. You used the phrase litmus test in the opening. Like, England are a good barometer of where Ireland are at. I think, personally, why we haven't seen this performance is for all the reasons that we have talked about: the Lions tour, the age profile, the getting the team back up after, I suppose, for a lot of these players, that Lions tour, whether it was against subpar opposition or not, will still have been seen as some sort of mountain. And to get yourself back up after that is difficult. And I think to get the level of performance and the level of superiority that we saw on Saturday, I think an awful lot has to go to Andy Farrell and Andy Farrell's ability to push the right buttons. We touched on it earlier. Just, he is such a good manager of people, and I don't think that was ever in question whenever the team wasn't doing well. But I think this was just a reminder in terms of his point of difference as an international head coach. And it's not that he can't do the X's and O's. It's not that he's not good tactically, but his point of difference is how he manages people, how he manages personalities, and how he was able to get those performances out of players that have faced an awful lot of criticism recently, how he was able to get performances out of players that maybe that he hadn't criticized, but certainly that there was the feeling that he didn't entirely trust, Jack Crowley being the main one. But I would put Baloucoune into that mix as well, because he went a long time without picking Robert Baloucoune. Now, injuries were a huge part of that, but to be able to push those buttons to get the performances, and it contrasts to England, because England in their selection, and well, we would say getting their selection wrong, but they were also in a similar position coming into the game of relying on a very experienced core and needing to get a response from that core, needing to get that core back up to the level that they have shown that they can be at previously. Farrell was able to do it. Borthwick wasn't. Borthwick was essentially let down by the performances of his experienced group. There's been so much focus on, Pollock coming in for his first start and how that didn't work. And I do agree that it didn't work in the sense that they missed Underhill at the breakdown. They were so beat at the breakdown. Luke mentioned James Ryan, which I think is a really worth highlighting, that, England lost 8 rucks, Ireland only lost 1. I think Ryan was central to that. I think that really contributed to Ireland's superiority in the breakdown, which then in turn leads to Jamieson Gibson Park putting in one of these all-time Ireland performances. And these things all feed in together. But I think it all boils down to the fact that Farrell was just able to get the response that was needed to get that performance on this particular day. Now, the key is then going on and doing it you would still expect them to beat Wales. You would still expect them to beat Scotland, although that is going to be an interesting game. Scotland coming over looking for, a first Triple Crown in 26 years, I think, or 36 years, sorry. Older than I think I am there. But it's doing it again. And this, we have these big litmus tests again coming this year with the fixtures that are coming in the summer and November. So I think it is going to be really interesting to, as you say, not get this performance as a one-off, but to have this as, if not a rebirth, and a renewal of this Ireland team, and to show that this isn't, one last great performance, that they can build on it and get closer to the likes of South Africa, New Zealand, and France, because they've looked far off them whenever they've played them over the last year and a half, really.
Well, they have New Zealand in Eden Park in the summer, which will obviously be an interesting one, because it's funny, in 2021 when Ireland played so well against England, the team almost went into cold storage then because it was a Lions tour. And I vividly remember going, the first November game was against Japan, so it wasn't even a big beast, but you were kind of on the edge of your seat being like, are we going to see the team from England in the Six Nations, or was it going to go back to the way it had been in the Andy Farrell tenure up to now? So it'd be fascinating to see after the break week. I know it's Wales, it's not Scotland first up, so it should be an easier one on paper, but are they going to be able to carry in the form they showed in Twickenham? Because Luke, like you were mentioning there, how the handling jumped out to you and the crispness of it and some of the tries and the interplay was what we've come to expect from Ireland at their best. But you're kind of like, well, why wasn't it like that 7 days earlier against Italy? That's kind of begs the question.
Yeah, it does, and it's a question without an easy answer, Will. To me, I thought they delivered on the basics really well. I thought they defended better than they defended against Italy as well, for the most part. I thought they hung in there really tight. I mean, some of the English play was actually really nice. They got themselves to nice edges. They put themselves in good positions. They were getting momentum with the tight exchanges. They looked really good at the start of the game, but Ireland held in there. And it's funny what you can do when you can hang in there, and how deflating it is for another team when you get that that one of those penalties close to the line. You clear it, you go down the other end of the pitch, you score a try. Like, that is massively deflating for an opposition team, even for one as experienced as England in some parts of the some positions on the pitch. They lost heart, and you can do that to teams by hanging in there. And I think not to, because it's Prendergast's international career is far from over. That I'm absolutely certain of that. Okay, but some of Crowley's tackling on the weekend. Like, it's absolutely essential to have that. Like, you just have to have everyone. To me, that's a basic, is that if everyone's tackling on the pitch, well, straight away, you're hard to beat. You're hard to score a try against. That's a great place to start a test match. So Farrell's getting loads of praise, but I think he was forced into that decision. And I think he's, I'm hoping that the penny has dropped a bit there, but, he's getting lots of praise. But to me, it's too late for that. I thought as well, just to come in on your point around the kind of barometer for this team going forward, like, to me, that should be the rebasing now for this team. I've heard behind the scenes from a few contacts in there that they trained the house down apparently in the French week. They couldn't understand what performance they put out there. So hopefully they've kind of kept that going, and now they've got the performance and the confidence from the English game to kind of kick on and to get themselves back into the mix with France and South Africa, New Zealand, and be a proper threat to those teams. So to me, that's where this team is. I do think that crucial change at 10 has made a massive difference. He was calm, he was assured. I saw him giving out to Lockman at one stage when he dropped a bad ball. I just thought I was really impressed with him. I still think he's got to get the kicking right. There was one sloppy one off the deck that was poor. He threw out of hand. He threw out a hand that he didn't need to do. He could have kept the foot on the throat a little bit, but he was trying a few things. And that's being overly critical of him possibly. But to me, I thought there were two that he could have, there was two sloppy kicks that kind of got blocked down, or, they got kick blocked and stuff. And I was thinking, or foot blocked. And I was thinking, he probably didn't need to do them. But I thought he was excellent aside from that, and his tackling was unbelievable. He put in some serious hits out there for kind of a guy who's, not a huge athlete, but he's still a good athlete. So he made a massive difference. I think Stuart McCloskey next to him, guys, the energy, the pace, the power, the bit of offloading that he gets you, and the stuff that he gets you there made a massive difference too. So yeah, like, I think they have something that they can rebase from, and that should be the standard for the team going forward. And I think they've eventually got to the right selection at 10. I think that's made a massive difference to the team, guys. I really do.
Well, just on the kind of the new measuring stick going forward, like, it's helpful to have clips from 2026 and not have to show like Durban in 24 and be like, this is a standard we need to set, because it'd been a long time to have a performance alongside Marseille, Durban, we talk about 2023 a lot. Like it's 3 years ago now, since 2023. It doesn't feel like that in my mind's eye, but it actually is if you look at a calendar. So to have that new measuring stick is good. I agree with you on Crowley. I was very impressed with him. Jonathan, in some ways, this might sound kind of a strange thing to say, but the fact that he wasn't the main character in the game, I actually thought was a benefit. Like, I actually thought he just played his role well. He didn't try to do too much. I know there's a couple of moments, maybe Luke said there, to be fair, that he tried one or two things, but I just thought he facilitated the guys around him very well. As Luke said, he made his tackles. It was refreshing to come out of a game and not have like the 10 being the very dominant talking point. Like, if I'm Sam Prendergast and I'm sitting at home watching that, though, I might be like, geez, I wish my teammates had played as well in my matches as they did on Saturday as well. Like, I think the guys around Crowley did play really, really well at a level, as we said, hadn't been hit. Luke, did you want to come in on that? I feel like you were...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm right on the edge. Sorry, John. I just felt, I gave him a little bit of criticism when he was playing with Munster, and I know the dynamic is probably different there. He is the main player in the play down in Munster, but he was carrying the ball too much. I thought, and I'd be interested to hear Jonathan's opinion on this. I thought he kept it really simple outside of and he didn't find himself in contact too much, didn't carry the ball. He just gave the ball to the first guy he saw. He organized what was around him. He organized the team, and I thought it was quietly really, really important for him to do that. And I think the team really benefited from that. His handling was crisp. He didn't overcomplicate. He just delivered to the next guy with him. And I thought Stuart McCloskey of all people was a real big benefactor in that. And as a result, the team was, because if Stu's playing well, and he was really on top. I mean, I thought Dingwall really struggled to contain him, as did Ford. Whenever he came up against them and other guys as well, in fairness, they really struggled to contain him. They couldn't get him down, couldn't get the ball off him. He was making easy yards. And I thought a lot of that was because I thought the team were good. The pack play, the interplay amongst the pack was very good, but Crowley directed the team really well and didn't try and carry too much. And that's really important for him. I thought that was a big moment for him, that he needs to keep that going, because his opportunities will open up for him. They will. And it's great to know that you have a guy who's an athlete who can take the opportunity, but he shouldn't be looking for it as often as he was. So I don't know what Jonathan has to say about that, but I thought it was really important to how the Irish team attacked on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was probably the key thing that jumps out to me from his performance, because we talked an awful lot really in December and January about how it looked like he was trying to do far too much at Munster, how it looked like he was going into this almost hero ball mode too often. Some of the kicks that he was trying that just weren't going to come off and just seemed too ambitious. And I think the way that he fitted into the system. Now, I also take Will's point of, if you're Sam Prendergast, you're there looking at that pack and the performance from the 9, the speed of ball, thinking it would have been great to play behind that over the past 2 weeks. But I think it was a really mature performance. It was a really composed performance. And it was a performance that, to me, had a real understanding of Ireland's 10 within this system, Ireland's 10 alongside Jamison Gibson Park. And the reality, I suppose, is, we've talked about before, and I think Will was maybe the one that made the point before, of Ireland's 10 is going to be one of their weakest players. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that the fact of the matter is that you're surrounded by all these British and Irish Lions and really experienced Test players. Ireland don't necessarily need their 10 right now to be a point of difference. They need their 10 to not be a negative. And I think we saw that from Crowley, where don't get me wrong, it was a very good performance, but it wasn't a performance of somebody that felt like they had to shoulder the responsibility of what that jersey has meant to Irish rugby over the last 30 years. It was somebody who was performing in the here and now with a real understanding of what they needed to do and how good they needed to be to contribute to an Ireland team performance and an Ireland team victory.
I think that's a good point, because it would have been very easy or tempting, say, for Crowley to come in and be like, this is my chance. I've been brought back in. Sam Prendergast is gone. It's Ireland, England at Twickenham. I need to be the main man here. But to what we were all kind of saying here, I feel like whatever maybe messages the coaches had given him about fitting in is he took on board, and he didn't try to be the main character. I think that's the blueprint for Ireland to have success. I think it's the out half just kind of keeping the team moving, keeping playing guys around him who are in form. If the guys around him aren't in form, we've kind of seen in the medium term, we're not going to have success, really. So the out half just needs to kind of do what he did at the weekend, and I thought he did that very well.
But I think just to counter the kind of Prendergast comment around, the team not playing, like, is he watching that going, where were the guys the week before? To be honest with you, think about when Crowley came on against Italy. He made a massive impact. The team looked quite like going forward. The team did look more dangerous with him running the show in attack when he came on. He had that zip. He took the ball to the line. He delivered kind of crisp passes to people. He was a bit of a threat himself, because I think sometimes Prendergast can be very cross field, even though his ball handling is beautiful. He can get lovely offloads away. He's very creative. Sometimes he was looking for the over the top pass or the wide play all like a little bit too much. And I think a lot of those balls that are called at the back of the forward formations, a lot of that comes from the 10 or the back side of that. So remember, he probably is a bit he can learn from that, from the last 20 minutes against Italy, where the team looked way more dangerous, but way more direct as well. And what happened in Twickenham, because they were way more direct there as well, guys. I mean, the forwards passing, the interplay amongst the forwards, oftentimes that's because they don't hear a call from the 10. Or the 10 is saying to carry it. Do you know what I mean?
So I take that point. Like, the team don't play in a vacuum. Like, so obviously the out half contributes. But there was some of the sloppy handling that is independent of it as well. Like say Joe McCarthy threw a careless ball at the back against Italy last weekend. That kind of stuff wasn't happening at the weekend. So no, but I do take your point. It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
And I think that's fair. As with most of these things, probably a bit of a combination of both, isn't it? And the team, I think they feel more confident when he's in there. When I think they look more confident with Crowley. Maybe that's because Crowley's playing with a bit more confidence. I did think it looked to me like they had a refocus on the ruck as well, guys. I mean, the ruck was like, because England did compete hard at times, but Ireland were really on the ball there. Their technique was really good. And I thought they were violent in there. They were really violent. So Gibson Park straight away has a completely, it adds a new dimension to Ireland's game when he has a little bit of front foot ball and clear, when he can get it out of there quickly. So I think that's another factor as well in terms of why the team played so well. Probably a key factor was how Gibson Park played and the positions the team put him in to be able to impact the game and do what he's really great at. That wasn't just a Crowley or a forward pack. That was, a pack that was kind of a team mentality around the ruck. And probably the threat that England might have caused them there with who they selected, to be honest with you. But it was good to see. The one thing I would say, because I think it's very important, it's not over for Prendergast. It certainly isn't. I think Crowley looks like we were looking for someone to be kind of head and shoulders above, or at least pop their head above the parapet as the key guy. I think we probably found that at this stage, but that doesn't mean, I think there's a long road to run here. I don't think it's over. I just think, it's a good moment for Prendergast to take stock of maybe what Crowley has done quite well. And also the parts of his game that he needs to improve on. I think it'll be a good moment for him. He's a young guy. And I don't want to stick the boot in too much, to be honest with you. I think let's focus on what Crowley was so good at.
Yeah. I think what he did that was really important in terms of the selection debate is that we now have somebody claiming the jersey rather than jersey being given away. Because if you think about coming into November, there was the perception that Farrell wanted to pick Prendergast, but he couldn't pick Prendergast because of how badly Prendergast had played against Munster. And even if you think about coming into the Six Nations, we talked about it in January, that there was a perception that you couldn't pick Crowley because he wasn't kicking well enough to be a test level fly half. So it always felt like in recent times, certainly this year, whoever has been picked because of something that the other one has done. Whereas now going into the Wales game, it will feel like Crowley will be picked because of something that Crowley's done. And I think that's a much better position to be in as well.
That's what we're assuming Farrell will do. But we actually don't know what team he might pick. Look, I feel like sometimes he picks a team in his own way. But that's the tens for now. We'll take a little break and then come back with some of the other players who stood out. Jonathan, Luke mentioned Stuart McCloskey there. Like, what a kind of a day it was for him. 10 years on from making his debut at Twickenham. A performance that kind of went down in somewhat of infamy, maybe unfairly, in terms of maybe a few loose offloads and how Joe Schmidt interpreted that performance. And at the time, he was seen as this big, powerful ball carrier who could have a long Ireland career. And obviously, because the centres have been such an area of strength generally, like Bundyaki made that jersey his own for a long time. He's had to really bide his time. But he was absolutely unbelievable. Luke alluded to it there. Some of the big barnstorming carries, obviously in the build-up to the second try, probably stood out the most. Him, herring down after Marcus Smith was an unbelievable bit of, to still have that in the tank. And the pace, just to begin with, the haul down Marcus Smith was impressive. You saw how much Andy Farrell celebrated that one. Even kind of a small moment just before the Dan Sheehan bonus point try, the quick tap around the line. Like Stuart McCloskey gets smashed right on the gain line by Tom Curry, but he's able to he's such a powerful guy, kind of eke out 2 or 3 more yards to get Ireland just up to the precipice of the line. a phase or two later, Dan Sheehan's burrowing over. I think he's the first name on the team sheet now, almost, in the form that he's in. What an unbelievable performance that was from him.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point about, where he stands on the team sheet now, because he hasn't necessarily been Ireland's best player. He certainly wasn't at the weekend because Gibson Park was. But I would say if you take his last 5 caps, he's been one of Ireland's 3 best players in all of those. That's the level of consistency that he's found at test level at the age of 33. And the idea about 10 years after Twickenham, 10 years after it really becoming apparent that Joe Schmidt just didn't fancy him as a player. There is an element of that, and there is the element of, Farrell giving him that bit more freedom to play the way that he wants to play the game, rather than the way that Joe Schmidt wanted his entire team to play the game. But I also think that to just limit it to that, I think does McCloskey a bit of a disservice as well, because I think that ignores how much better a player he is at 33 than he was at 23, how much more rounded his skill set is. We see his passing ability, not just his offloading ability. He's always had the willingness to offload, and he's always been a good offloader. I think he's got better. But where he's really made a point of difference, I think, is his passing ability. You see the way that he can get the ball wide now. He's much more than just the ball carrier that he was always viewed as. And it really came to the fore, I think, on Saturday with just, I suppose, how poor England were defending out wide, and then McCloskey's ability to get the ball wide and put the wingers, Balogun, O'Brien, to give them the opportunity to use their pace. I thought was a huge part of the game as well. And then you mentioned defensively, I think the chasing down of Smith, again, he wouldn't have been known as a particularly pacey player, but to be able to make up that much ground at that point in the game when the result is not in doubt, I thought that was incredible. And we know that if Andy Farrell was to be the one making a Stu McCloskey highlight reel of this season, he would have that front and center. That would be the first thing that he showed. Just with, and you mentioned it there, even the amount of celebration that he get, he celebrated that more than he celebrated the tries whenever the camera panned up to him. That's what Andy Farrell loves. We think back to I think Rod mentioned this at the weekend, but you think back to the Lions series whenever he was asked about his thoughts about the Brumbies, and he zeroed in on Mac Hansen doing something similar. That's what he wants. Whenever Farrell talks about intent, and whenever Farrell talks about pride in the jersey and pride, making the fans that have travelled over proud, those are the things that he's thinking about. He's not thinking about scoring 5 tries in Twickenham. He's thinking about giving everything for the cause and really applying yourself and giving everything that you have to give. And I think it'll be that moment, I think, more than anything else, that really typifies how Farrell will view that performance from McCloskey. And really the fact that he, we talked about coming in, he's the starting 12, irrespective of the Aki situation. But I think the way that he's played over the past 3 weeks is a different scenario again, because as you say, it's his importance to this team now, not just the fact that he's a starter in this team, really for the first time in a first team scenario over the past sort of 4 or 5 months, but he's now a really, really important player for this team as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And just in the moment, chasing down Marcus Smith and how much Farrell will value, like another player I was going to bring up is Robert Balogun, and he obviously had a lot of eye-catching moments. For me, one of the key ones was, I think the score was 32-14 at this stage. Tommy Freeman's put through down the right wing and looks like he's going to go in the corner, and Tommy O'Brien kind of comes across and gets a bit of a hand on him, and Balogun smashes him in the touch on the 5 metre line. And if you look at the overhead camera where Balogun starts out, when Freeman is kind of about to get the ball, he's kind of like around his own post or even further back. He makes up a huge amount of ground to come across and complete that tackle, that double tackle with Tommy O'Brien and get him into touch. And that I think that again, like, is something that I think Farrell will really highlight, because it was like the game was still in the melting pot there. Actually, like, kind of Ireland, I know, had a big lead, but there was a period in the second half when it got to 29-14. I think it was 25 minutes to go at that stage. Ireland had just had a guy in the bin. England had a chance to get back into the game. So, like, the moments like that were still kind of crucial. Luke, what did you make of the two wingers generally? Obviously, O'Brien came on pretty early doors. Like, they were so lively. They were so influential in that first half when the score went to 22-0. Like, if you look at the 3 tries Ireland scored, like, the first one initially kind of comes from Balogun taking Arundel around the outside and offloading to Tommy O'Brien. That initially gets Ireland in behind the cover, and it ends up with Gibson Park taking the quick tap. In the second one, like, Tommy O'Brien claims the high ball in the build-up to McCloskey's break, and then Balakoon scores, and then obviously Balakoon with the show and go, and O'Brien finishes off for the third try. They were just everywhere in that first half. Like, as a winger yourself in your heyday, like, what did you make of how those two lads played?
Yeah, I thought they were great. Really, really, like a real breath of fresh air. I think really pleased. I think I feel like the guys got absolutely cleaned out by the coaching staff for the performance in the air against France. Fairly evident, I think, with Stockdale getting dropped, I think, after the game. I think actually the tackle, I'm not sure they minded as much, because I think that was kind of a trickier one, but I think the stuff in the air was what really cost them. And I think what cost Tommy O'Brien as well. So there's been a real refocus on that. I thought Balakoon was outstanding. Oh, Osborne, by the way, not much mentioned, but he had a really great game at the back as well. Very assured. I thought he was really, really good. Some lovely kicks as well here and there. Thought he was really good. But just keeping it to the wingers, O'Brien was great. Didn't put a foot wrong. High energy, very pacey. Himself and Balakoon were a constant threat whenever they touched the ball. And it was great to see. And it was great to see them playing with such confidence. So Balakoon, the little show and go was beautiful. Now, shocking defence by Dingwall, in fairness, but it was fantastic. The little show and go, and then the delivery to O'Brien, and the pace to finish that as well. I mean, really, O'Brien looks absolutely rapid when he takes off there.
Because Freeman was within touching distance of O'Brien when he got the ball.
He still has to turn. He still has to turn, but you thought maybe there was a second where I was like, okay, he slowed up, but then he was able to go again. And you could see Freeman knew he wasn't going to be catching him the further it went, so it was impressive by O'Brien and by Balakoon. So I thought it was great. I was so pleased for the pair of them. I'm really particularly pleased for Balakoon. I think he's had a really tough look. I think his I saw someone calling it. Was someone off the ball was saying, they've been calling it, the Balakoon thing for years. Everyone's been calling the Balakoon thing for years. He just couldn't stay fit. So it's great to see him. Hopefully, the key thing for him now is, can he stay fit? Can he remain fit and keep those hammies in good order, in good working order? Because I think he could be a crucial guy for Ireland going forward. He looked so athletic. I thought his defence as well, guys, was really, really good. I thought he made some great tackles. We talked about you must have unfollowed me on Twitter, Will. I have a nice still image of the chase across on Balakoon. I think he starts even further back than the post. He starts from miles in. And he goes early. And I talked about the week before about the Spidey senses up. You could see they were up quickly, because O'Brien, actually, in fairness to O'Brien, he makes complete hames of the front line defence. He bites in when he shouldn't have, and the ball goes right across him. He makes a mess of it, but he never gives up, and he tries all the way to the end. It just catches him, and I actually think he might tackle him. He may not have, but I think he was actually about to tackle Freeman, and obviously Balakoon.
He slows him down for sure. He definitely gets
he slows him down, and he gives Balakoon the opportunity to put him into touch. So, because it could have been a very different tackle if I think it was Freeman was able to just stop dead and possibly let Balakoon go by him, or at least put a step on him. He might have gone all the way if O'Brien doesn't get back from. So combined effort by the two guys. I think Farrell would have loved that as well, because to me what it says is there's two parts of that. There's O'Brien never giving up, but there's Balakoon willing to put in the early work. And that's something that the top class sports people in general, they have that. They put themselves in good positions early it was a great Joe Schmidt expression, working harder earlier. And that's what he did. You can see him starting miles out going, I think there could be trouble here. It's a Spidey sense. He has it. So to me, I thought it was brilliant. And there was loads, aside from the high balls, which we all kind of saw, and the attacking play, it was the defensive stuff that was really, really pleasing to me. And it made Ireland stingy. And it made them difficult to beat.
Balakoon,
great place to start, guys.
Even in the opening exchanges, like Balakoon comes out of the line, near the line, and kind of forces a knock on from Freddie Stewart. At that stage, it's 3-0 to Ireland only, and England are like the first 15 minutes. England actually looked pretty good. Like the pack were punching holes. They made 4 or 5 forays into the 22. And Jonathan, we were kind of talking off air, like. And we had mentioned this last week about like the idea that like losing to Scotland and England getting that punch in the nose, and how they would react to that. And we weren't sure there would be this big response, and we thought it might actually hurt them losing that kind of winning run. And I thought their heads dropped, as Luke mentioned earlier, like significantly. Like those 2 forward touch finders, missing those. Then like missing the Genge chance around the line when he kind of like, I don't know if he wasn't expecting it, kind of ball went back and low, was able to hack clear. Because even in the second half, as I alluded to, like the England were within striking distance. Like it was 15 points in it, but Ireland a man in the bin. And how they managed the next couple of minutes try to run out of their own territory. Ben Earl knocks the ball on. Ireland get a free kick at the scrum, and then at the next ruck or two, Bevan Rodd goes off his feet. It's an easy 3 points to Ireland, just relieving that bit of pressure. I guess maybe the confidence of the team was maybe a little paper thin, because I just thought as soon as Ireland got a bit of a run on them, they kind of their heads just completely dropped.
Yeah, absolutely, because they were just so. I mean, they were error strewn, but they were error strewn at the worst possible moments because they were just so wasteful. I mean, everyone's got their own opinions of, analytics, but if you're looking at a 42-21 game, like, up to do their expected points, and by expected points, England should have won that game. And you can almost see where that idea is coming from, because England had 12 entries into the 22. Now, that's not counting the 2 missed kicks where the ball went dead. So they had 12 entries into the 22 and only came away with points 3 times. All those moments that we're mentioning, the Balogun forcing the knock on, the Balogun with the tackle off the maul and on George, I think it was. All of these moments are ones where England were in the 22 and failed to come away with points. And that really, for everything that we talked about the game, that really was the difference between the two teams. England had 12 visits to the 22 and scored on 3 occasions. Ireland had 9 visits to the opposition 22 and scored on 7 occasions. That's how you end up with a 21-point margin of victory. England were in the position to win that game, and that's what's so strange about their performance. That's what's so, I suppose, strange about talking about the idea that they needed a response. Like, they were in the position to get that response, they just couldn't execute. And you talk about the confidence being paper thin. Mistakes lead to mistakes. Mistakes are contagious, and that's what we saw, because they, time and time again, got themselves in the right position. They had the dominant scrum. Their line-out was a mess, but they were in the positions, I suppose, to make those count, but couldn't. And then just all the times that they, for as well as Ireland scrambled and for as well as Ireland defended, after a couple of missed tackles, I suppose, in fairness, but like, England were just never able to make anything of those opportunities. They were never able to gain the momentum in the game in the way that some of their play that preceded those key moments really warranted. And that's what's, if I was looking at it from an England perspective, that would be what concerned me, really, that they were in that game, because it looks like they've just been, if you're just looking at the score, it looks like they've just been battered by a better team. But if you actually look at, the stats from the game, everything's relatively even, apart from,
turnover is pretty different.
Yeah, how clinical the teams were, and Ireland just bossed the breakdown, really.
My least favourite thing from an England perspective, if I was an England supporter watching this moment, I think it's 62 minutes in, Ireland are 32-14 ahead. England get a scrum penalty, getting pumped, and Ben Earl is like fist pumping, like he does like 3 fist pumps, like, and they're getting hammered, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to, like, what? That's some of the most fakest kind of, like, let's G up the lads kind of thing I've seen. And I know he's been guilty of this his whole career, like a free kick at a line out and he's on one knee, like giving it another big fist pump. But I just thought that was humiliating. I really did. I was embarrassed on behalf of, like, English rugby as a whole, watching him celebrate like that, because it was such a meaningless moment in the game where the game was kind of done at that stage, like 18 points down. Just to over celebrate like that, I just thought it was indicative of kind of this, like, they're trying to manufacture this kind of, oh, we're actually confident, but are you really confident? Because the way you guys are playing doesn't indicate that you are. You're just trying to kind of manufacture that. There's a few other moments I just want to throw out and get, you guys can come in on any of them, like, Joe McCarthy early doors. I was pretty quick enough to point out the 3 points he gave away on Paris. So that the kind of that destruction of the English maul, winning that ball, directly contributed to Ireland kicking that first 3 points of the game. Like, I know Ireland ended up winning by 21, but the game was in the melting pot in the first 15-20 minutes. And that was a huge moment early on of him stamping his authority. We know he can do that. Like, Gibson Park had a couple of really kind of little early snipes. Like, he was just so alert. He always picking the right option. He was keeping the England defence on their toes. Great quick thinking between himself and Tadhg Beirne. Like, Tadhg Beirne just flipping him the ball. English defence caught napping, like just coasting in past Joe Hayes. Really like that. Anything else that I have on my sheet? Doris's little bit of interplay to Balogun in the build up to the third try, Luke. He kind of like half drew him, a little bit.
I thought it was horrendous by Dingwall.
Yeah. So Doris gets no credit for the little bit of
no. It was nice. It was nice play, but like how it was a bit like O'Brien's how he squares the shoulder into Doris there. Pretty. I as a centre, I would be horrendified by that. Looking at it, I'd be so embarrassed by that. It's shocking stuff. I'm not even sure that's a word, but I'm using it to describe it. I think we all know what it means.
Horrendified.
Pretty shocking stuff. Like I just think some of the quality of defense nowadays, I think people are really used to just flying out of the line all the time and sitting there. And I actually thought Ireland did it really well, by the way, in the wide channels when they were numbers down, a few times in that English kind of purple patch at the start of the game, where the guy I thought I was really pleased to see it, where they kind of held off a little bit. I think Leinster, because of that new defensive system they kind of employ, they've lost a bit of that skill of being able to hold off and let a team just let the play develop and then tackle them and slow them down at the ruck. You know, that kind of old school defense you don't hear many people saying. But sometimes you got to employ it where you go a little bit softer. New Zealand did it against Ireland at the World Cup. You don't take all the ground all the time if you're down numbers. You let the play develop and then you kind of number up and you make your tackles. I thought Ireland did that really well. I thought England really didn't do that well. You know, when they were numbers down, they didn't just hold off and let Ireland play and let the numbers. You'll get yourself in a position where your numbers on, and then it's just about making your tackles. You know, so that was a big difference in both teams. That was a great bit of play by Doris. I will agree. I mean, he did fish him out of the line, but to me, when you see number 8 doing that, and there's a guy who's close enough to tackling him as he's doing it. To me, if I was Dingwall, I'm putting my left arm out to Doris, pushing myself away into the space onto Balakoon. Yeah, look, that was a big moment. I thought there was other big moments too. I mean, I think we barely mentioned Doris. He was outstanding. He was absolutely
his best performance.
He had one of those performances. Well, remember I said a couple of weeks ago about Doris, and when he's playing well, he kind of rides tackles that he shouldn't. You know, he kind of gets a bit like you were talking about McCloskey. You know, a few big, sometimes there was a big hit. I think we were talking about the Curry hit where he gets hit well, but he still gets another 2 yards or whatever it is. Doris did that consistently on the weekend. You know, he got hit and you're kind of going, okay, that's that. But all of a sudden he's another 2 yards or he's got through. It's like, how did he actually get through there? There's some poor English defense too, but he capitalized on it and he didn't die with the ball and he was really aggressive. And I thought we saw that ball handling ability that he does have and that should form a really a normal part of the game for him. He's a good enough player to make good decisions on the line under pressure, to make short passes, to make good passes out the back. And we saw all those things. So that was another factor in the game. I thought Ireland were quite direct at times, which is really important against a defense like that. And they put them on their heels. So they did force England to make some bad decisions and to make some poor tackles. So it wasn't just England defending badly. Ireland did attack quite well as well.
I thought the discipline was a lot better as well. There wasn't that kind of like head. There was obviously a few penalties. Obviously the scrum. The scrum was.
They rode their luck a little bit at times, Will. I thought in that second half. I don't know what Jonathan thinks as well. I thought there was a period where I thought England, we got absolutely shafted at the start of the game. The Tommy O'Brien one was an absolutely bizarre decision. The one in the air that breaks loose. I thought that was a shocking bit of the decision making, and to blow it up without even going back to the TMO, I just thought was horrendous. So I think there probably was honours even there and netted off. But I thought we wrote our look. There was one point where I was saying, there should be a yellow card tacked on to one of those tries. I think, kind of similar to what happened to England.
Yeah, well, Osborne did get a yellow card after the second England try.
No, but there was another one, wasn't there, where the first English try, I thought we were lucky not to get a yellow. There had been 2 penalties in the run up to it, hadn't there?
Yeah. Well,
it
was good to see referees in 2 instances going back because you don't always see them do that. I thought Tyke Byrne had a kind of a very impactful game. He had one unbelievable steal near halftime in the first half, like on the Irish line, basically. Like he comes in and takes the ball, took a while for the referee to give that one. That was a big one as well. Jonathan, one thing about the wings that that really did impress me was how they kind of popped up on the opposite side of the field as well, which is when we're seeing, like, say when it was like Lowe and Hanson, they were both humming. Like, they would often get involved, and I know Andy Farrell, it's a big thing of his, but like, say like Balakoon goes around Arundel and offloads to O'Brien, who's appeared on the right wing, and then for the try, Balakoon is on the left wing, does the show and go and feeds O'Brien. Like, when you think of Ireland playing really well, it is the wings popping up in places that you're not used to maybe seeing them, and probably necessarily wouldn't be as something you'd see from the two lads as much as maybe Lowe and Hanson, who are a bit more free-spirited in how they play rugby. It's great to obviously maybe see them buying into that and making that a kind of a strength of their game as well, because it was vital on the weekend. Created 2 tries.
Absolutely, because I think when two wingers have that out-and-out pace that Balogun and O'Brien have, it's maybe more difficult, maybe not more difficult, but they're maybe more reticent to build in other elements of their game, because James Lowe and Mac Hansen wouldn't be the quickest of wingers, but they would be the busiest of wingers. And that was always the book on Balogun during those years, whenever he was available. Now, obviously, he had his injuries problems. Whenever he was available and Farrell went in a different direction, it was that Farrell wanted wings that came off their wing and went looking for work. They were busy, that linked up in the middle of the field and got involved in play outside of just waiting for the ball to come to them on their wing and using their pace that way. And that's something that I think Balogun has really worked on. I think, in fairness to Mark Sexton and Richie Murphy, I think the way that Ulster are using their wings this season is much more in tune with the way that Andy Farrell wants to use his wings. And I think that's really helped Balogun. I asked him about it after the Stade Francais game, the Challenge Cup game in January, and he was saying that, you know, he hadn't really come back into the Ireland reckoning at that stage, but he did say that it was probably more similar what he's now being asked to do provincially than what Farrell wants him to do than it has been in the past. And I think that's just a real growth in his game. Like he's still only 28, you know. There's still a lot for him to build upon, but you would just love to see it. I think Luke touched on it earlier. You would just love to see him stay fit now. You would love to see him get a run and be able to maintain a run and not have it taken away by injury rather than anything else, you know?
Yeah, no, he's been obviously one of the finds of the championship. Backed up a great performance against Italy with a great performance on Saturday. Luke, like, what's your sense, just as we go to wrap up, like, of, say, if Ireland were playing France next Saturday in the Stade de France, that was the run of fixtures. Like, what? I'd love to know if Ireland rock up to the Stade de France and give a performance like they did on Saturday, what does that scoreline look like? What does that game look like? Like, where would Ireland be against a France playing like that versus what we saw on the opening night?
It'd be completely different, guys. It'd be a completely different game. Like, I think, look, I think France have the edge in us. But you know, if that team deliver on the basics like they did in the weekend, they're a fearsome outfit. Like it's got some serious threat there. They've got pace now out wide. You know, they've got that solidity. They've got that big kind of battering ram in the middle of the pitch that actually has a little bit of nuance around them as well. In McCloskey, I think they'd be stingier defensively with Crowley there. So there's no easy gain lines. And look, I think the issue is for Ireland probably against France is probably the scrum. Less so again. Italy seem to possibly have the best scrum in the competition, but I think they'd struggle at the scrum still. There were still a few issues, I think, against England there. And I do wonder, I mean, England's line-out really did falter. So you would wonder about that. Would they get on as well there? Don't think France would have missed those 2 kicks at the corner, so maybe they get 1 try there, and it's a very different complexion to the game. So look, it's very difficult to say. What I would say is I think they've been away with their position because I think they delivered on way more of the basics. They caught the ball, they rucked really well, they defended well. To me, it would have been a way different game. And, you know, if they could get fast ball, I think there'll be a threat for anyone if they can get that kind of quality ball against any team. Now, would they get that against France? It's a different question. But you'd certainly be more competitive, we'll put it that way, because that one looked out of sight pretty early. We looked like it was, you know, we were nullified fairly quickly against France and didn't really produce anything in the attack side of the game. So, you know, to me, most of the key pillars of the game, we were way better against England, despite them being poor. We were better, and we would have been better against France. Whether it was enough to beat them in the Stade de France, different question. But would have been a different game, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I suppose this game for me just kind of it tells me that this team can still reach a level that I wasn't sure they could reach. As we said, Durban is 18 months ago. That was the last time I think a lot of people would say Ireland reached the level we would have been seeing from them in their pomp under Andy Farrell. Now they've shown that, okay, they still can get to that level. Now, time will tell whether England are just really far off the very top teams. As we said, we'll see in the summer when Ireland go to Eden Park, they could become the first team to ever win there. If Ireland go and play like that and beat the All Blacks and take a scalp no team has ever been able to take in the professional era, then we'll know a year out from a World Cup where they're at. But certainly the mood is definitely different than it was even 7 days ago after Italy.
Even if you go and you play a team like France or you play a team like South Africa or the All Blacks and you play like that and you get beat, people would find that much more palatable than Paris. The problem with Paris was that Ireland were beaten by a better team, but without stamping their authority on the game, without showing their identity. They looked like a team without an identity, only 2 weeks ago. So if Ireland played like they played on Saturday against France and still got beat by 2 scores, I think people would have found that a lot less worrying than the way that they did get beat. It was the manner of the defeat that was worrying, because the margin of defeat was pretty much what we all expected it to be going into the game. So the fact that this Ireland team looks like a team, that looks like they know what they're trying to do, that looks like they have that identity that they can stamp on a game, even if they get beat by a better team, that would still be much more encouraging than what we saw 2 weeks ago. And that's what's, I suppose, if we zoom out a bit, which I suppose we are doing if we're looking towards the summer and beyond, that's the most important thing, that this team seems to have refound something over the 2 weeks that a lot of us didn't think was going to come back.
That's all we have time for on tonight's episode of The Left Wing, sponsored by Energia. Big thanks to Luke and Jonathan for joining me. We will be back next week. No Six Nations rugby, sadly, this weekend, but there is URC, and Andy Farrell, I think, has released 11 players, so we'll see a couple of the fringe squad members maybe trying to press their case ahead of Wales on Friday week, and then Scotland coming to town in 2 weeks' time, or 3 weeks' time, rather. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.